Thank you so much for joining. As usual, in this video, I'm going to deal with another interesting and important topic of Azure. So that is Cosmos DB. So which is NoSQL Cloud Cosmos DB. So in this video, what we are going to do. So we are going to see how to create Cosmos DB, how to create Cosmos DB by using the browser, how to create Cosmos DB by using command line. Then we will discuss how to create a container and the importance of partition key, how to define a partition key. Then we will write a simple .NET console application so that will connect to your Cosmos DB. So during that we will see what are the important keys we have to take it from connect to Cosmos DB. So then by using the console application, I'll retrieve the data from the Cosmos DB. So before that, I'll set up the data in the browser itself. I'll show how to set up the data. And when we set up the data, like what are the different parameters the Cosmos DB record creates. So the video is going to be very interesting and informative. Please watch till the end. So this is your Azure, and how can you create a Cosmos DB? You can search for a Azure Cosmos DB. So this will display all the existing Cosmos DBs. You can click on create new. So here you can create two types of Cosmos DB. One is Azure Cosmos for NoSQL, and this is with MongoDB compatibility. So I'm going to explore SQL in this video. Might be I'll create future videos on the MongoDB as well. So click on create. So you can see workload type. You can select development, testing, production, learning. I'm going to select learning, and this is the subscription. And you have to select the resource group. You can give the account name. So give a unique Cosmos DB name, account name. So otherwise it throws DT Cosmos learning Cosmos. So this account name is available. So availability zone, I prefer to have all the default values because I'm not going to explore the availability for different zones and all. But you can select enable and you can select the available zones, the data available zones. Provision throughput only I'll select, apply, go to the globalization, networking. I'm keeping all the default values, security, service managed key, custom managed key. So you can define the tags. Finally, you can click on create. So this is the validation successful. Click on create. It will take a couple of minutes. So the Azure resources are very like expensive, like especially the kind of Cosmos DB. It take a lot of time when you're doing the browser, but if you're doing it through command line or pipelines, it will be a little faster. Let's give some time, complete the creation. This the deployment was complete. So you can go here, refresh. So DT Learning Cosmos. So this is the Cosmos DB I created just now by using the browser. So let's see how to create a Cosmos DB by using command line. So let's launch your console. Once it gets successfully authenticated, you can the command line. So the terminal connection is in progress. the session authentication. Yeah. So it's completed. So now I'm pasting the command. Let's paste command. So and go through. So AZ Cosmos DB create. This is the command. So we are giving the resource group name hyphen resource group. This is the name of the resource group, and this is the name of the Cosmos component I'm going to create. And this is the location and default consistency level. I'm keeping it session. So the kind. So this is the different types of Cosmos DBs you can create. So for this, like the NoSQL and MongoDB. So here I'm going to give. So let's type it wrong and see what are the available values for the kin. So I'll select document DB. So the actual value for the kin is global document DB, but I'm going to give it wrong so that it will throw an exception and it will see. The allowed values for kin will be global document ID MongoDB parse. That means in the earlier screen, I have shown how to create a NoSQL Mongo. There are two options, NoSQL and Mongo. So I created NoSQL. So if you want to do the same for by using command line, select global document DB. Now create document DB type. Yeah, even the command line took a little while to create the resource because these resources are very lengthy and they need a lot of creation to be happen. So take a couple of moments. But that is successful. You can just refresh and see the database. So if you want, you can just do the comparison, like what was the difference between these two. There might be some differences because I created the console Cosmos by using command line and this one by using browser. So the options in the browser might be more. There might be little differences, but both are the same type of NoSQL databases. So there is one more. So export template. This template, it will give the um, um, schema for the Cosmos DB. So if you are trying to automate by using Azure CI/CD pipeline, so this template will be useful. You can copy this and take the values from it when you are creating a CI/CD pipeline for creating the Cosmos DB. So in the next videos, I'm going to show how to create Cosmos DB by using CI/CD pipeline. That is the best way. So I created a new console application. So now I'm going to add a new class, create a new class, name it as my sample Cosmos class. You can name it whatever you want, but I'm going to as my sample Cosmos class. So let's define the steps. So in this class, I'm going to create few variables. So then going to show how to get and set those values. So again, here in this console application, I'm hard coding the values, which is not recommended for like demo purpose for simplifying the concepts. I'm showing this. So when you are working in your real time, you can use configuration mechanisms. So in the future demos, I'll show how to uh, make a configurable parameters for these values. Here, for simplifying the code, I'm going to hardcode. So these four are important parameters when you're connecting to your Cosmos DB. Yeah, so the endpoint URI. So this will tell what is the endpoint URI for your Cosmos. And this is the primary key. So there are like set of keys, primary key, secondary key. So that will allow, it's a kind of like credentials your Cosmos DB is allowing. So I'll show how to get this and retrieve the value from the Cosmos DB and put it here, and the database ID and the container ID. So before moving further, I did not create the database. So let's create the database for the Cosmos and define the data and come back here. So this is your Cosmos component we created. So we call it as a Cosmos account. So now we have to define the data or the container. So go to the data explorer. So here the containers. So in traditional SQL terms, the containers is similar to your tables. So the containers will hold multiple documents. So you can understand the container is similar to your table. So you can create the container by clicking on the new container. So here database ID, either you can create a new database ID or you can create, you can use the existing one. So I'm going to say DT database, DT, I gave some unique. So DT container. So when you are defining the container, you have to define the partition key. So here the partition key, I'm going to give subject ID. Defining partition key is compulsory. So your partition key will have a lot of impact on your data, like how the data will be stored and how being used in your retrieval. And once you define the partition key, you cannot change it. So just click on OK. So in traditional SQL, you will define the tables, the columns, but here in NoSQL, you will not define the columns. You will define the partition key. Like when you are creating the documents, you will add like as many components as you need. Let's see how to add data to your container. Expand your container. So when you expand your container, so you'll have items. You can create stored procedures and use the defined functions and others. So here I'm going to define the data. The data. How can I insert a data? New item. So here ID. We can ID. So it's going to create automated ID will be created. If you want, you can send it from your application ID as well. So subject ID, I'll give 1. For simplicity, I'm just using additional data. Subject name, it's .NET. Duration, 45. All are strings. And save the data. See, subject ID, subject name, duration. These are the 3 parameters, the data parameters are defined. But when the item got created, these parameters have been added by your Cosmos. So ID, a unique ID has been added, RID and self, E tags, any tag for this particular document, attachment, there are no attachments, and yes. So these are the like timestamp items or parameters have been added by Cosmos itself. So let's add few more records. There are three documents I defined. So this is .NET 45 days, Azure 60 days, Azure. So you can see your partition key, the records have been like they physically arranged by using your partition key. You can think the partition key as a primary key in the SQL, but it do more than the primary key. Now let's go back to your console application and continue writing the code. So I'll come like how to retrieve these values for your Cosmos. But before that, we will see what are the required packages we need to install here. So let's. So one of the important package you have to install is Microsoft.Azure.Cosmos. This will enable your .NET application to connect to your Cosmos DB and connect to the container and retrieve the data. Let's install it. So the package installation was successful, and you can see that. So there are some dependent packages required, like the new TransOft JSON was throwing exception for me. So I added new TransOft JSON and the issue got resolved. If you get some other exceptions, any dependencies, you try to resolve them. That depends on your like the version of the Visual Studio you are using or the version of the .NET Core you are using. But for me, the dependent package was NewtonSoft JSON. So now let's add code. So first you have to refer the namespace, so which is Microsoft .azure.cosmos, Microsoft.azure.cosmos. So you can define private Cosmos client. So this Cosmos client enables you to connect to your Cosmos, and there will be a container. So container, so this container will allow you to connect to your container and retrieve the data. For simplifying the code, I'm not writing any dependence. I'm not using any dependency injection. So straight away, I'm adding some code, async task. So connect to Cosmos. So this method will connect to the Cosmos. So here I'm initializing the Cosmos client to Cosmos client. So while initiating the Cosmos client, I have to pass endpoint URI and also the primary key. So these two are the variables I defined here. I'm going to fill these values. I'll show how to retrieve the values from the Azure and put it here. So your Cosmos client, when you are initiating your Cosmos client, you are passing endpoint URI and primary key as a parameter so that the connection will be established to your Cosmos account. So when you are now I have to create the container. I have to initiate the container. So the container class is abstract class. So you cannot create object for this abstract class. Then how can I do that? So if you want to get the instance of the container, you have to use Cosmos client dot get container. So this method is going to give the connection to your container or instantiate the container with the appropriate container you're looking for. So you have to pass the database ID and you have to pass the container ID. And again, I'll show how to retrieve these values from the Azure and it here so that the container object will be initialized and pointed to your container. So again, this Cosmos client is going to connect to your Cosmos account, which is nothing but dt learn Cosmos console, and the container object is going to point to your container. So in my database, in my account, I have only one container, dt container. So the container is going to point to this dt container. After successfully connecting to your container and your Cosmos client, let's add a couple of methods. So async task read item asynchronously. So this is a method going to use. So in this method, again, I'm going to define string ID to read, and this value I'm hard coding, and string key value. Okay, but I'm going to fill those values. So try catch exception. So when you're writing the Cosmos, I suggest you to implement the exception mechanism so that like if you see any errors, you can catch and you can record. So let's prepare the query how to read that. So item response. So before that, I want to define a model so that I can convert the data into the model. Going to define a model here. So I'll name it as my Cosmos model.cs. You can give some meaningful name. Going to use this for simplicity. So you can define the parameters. So I'm going to define string ID and string subject. So let's see what parameters we have in the data. Subject name and duration. Subject name, duration, and also the subject ID, I guess. Let's verify subject ID. Subject ID. So I can use this model when I get the data and I can assign it to. So in this code, I'm going to use the model. So response of my Cosmos model. So I'm going to get the response. So await container dot read item asynchronously. So this is the method of my container class. So read item asynchronously, and this item it's going to convert into the format of my model. So where I'm passing the IDT read and new partition. So basically what it's going to do, partition key value. So basically what it's going to do, it's going to from container, it's going to read the value, the key value. Yeah, so it's going to read item from the container which matches the ID and the key value we are passing. So suppose if I pass this ID and this key value, it's going to return this document. If I'm passing this ID and this key value, the subject ID here, the key value is nothing but the partition key value. So it's going to retrieve this item and it will display in your console application. So then my console model dot obj equal to response dot resource. So this particular response dot resource will give the data. So this will point to your document, and this will the response dot resource will give the data back to your object. Simply I'm doing console dot write line. So just I'll copy this. Object obj name the duration. So you can have a exception IDT read not found. So this method is basically using a default method of my container read item asynchronously, where I'm passing the ID and the partition key value. So it's going to retrieve that item and display. So this method is particularly is going to read a single item because I'm passing the ID and the partition key value. But if I want to read multiple items like a SQL query, so define one more method, private async task query items asynchronously. So if you want to write a SQL kind of query to retrieve your items, so you can use this method. I'll say query equal to select star from C, alias name, where C dot duration greater than 0, some sort of where condition. So then the query definition. So this is going to use the query definition. This method was using the default method of my container, but this query is going to use the query definition. So in real time, we will use the query definition more often because we will write the queries and we'll pull the data. So new query definition equal to new query definition and pass the SQL as query. So then we have to use we have to execute this query. So let's see how to execute. So for this, I'll use feed iterator. This feed iterator is going to iterate all the items, and they are going to convert in the format of your model. So feed iterator equal to new. No, I'm not going to create any feed iterator, but here get item query iterator. So in my soul model, just put this into the new line so that we can see that properly. Now I'm passing the query definition. So let's understand this line. So here I define the query and this is I initialize the query definition. So now again I am using the get item query iterator from the container method only, but this time I'm passing this query definition and I'm executing this query so that all the items will be iterated through your feed iterator. So it's a kind of like dr.read in the legacy connection oriented. So has more results. So this is the method it checks. So then again we are doing feed iterator. This time I'm going to get the specific item. So there are different ways to do that, but this is one of the way. So await feed iterator dot read next item. So it's going to read one by one item and it's going to assign it to this response. Sorry, it's feed response. So feed response from the iterator. So I'm going to get the record into the response. So this while loop will be executed 100 times if you have 100 records to read. So if your query is retrieving 100 records, this while loop will be executed 100 times. And each time this feed iterator will point to a record. So first time, first record, 50th time, 50th record, 100th time, the 100th record. So it's going to iterate all the records from this query, and each item you are going to hold this into this response. So like if you want, you can prepare a list and store the data. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just display for each var item response. I'll debug and I'll show how going to work. So copy this. Item. Item duration. So this is going to be item dot subject name dot duration. Now let's call these two from here so that reading a specific item query multiple items. So just summarize, I have a class where I defined the keys and the method called connect to Cosmos. So internally it is calling two methods, item read item asynchronously, where I'm passing a specific ID and key value. So it's going to return one value, one record. And this one is going to retrieve all the items which is matching your. Let's set your program.cs so that it can call the Cosmos class. So I created a Cosmos object and I'm calling connect to Cosmos. And I'm displaying the Cosmos exception. And I'm referring this Cosmos because I have to use this Cosmos exception class here. Before executing your class, so your code is ready to read the data from the Cosmos, connect to Cosmos and read the data item or by using query. But now we need to fill few parameters so that the connection will be successful. So the endpoint URI and primary key, database ID and container ID. Let's see how to fetch the values and use it here. So let's explore your, go to your Cosmos account and go to the settings. So there is a section called keys. So this will give complete information like how to connect to your, like what are the required parameters for your code to connect to your Cosmos DB. So the URI, you can just copy this and put it here. This is the endpoint URI and the primary key. So here I have primary key, secondary key, connection string, etc. So yeah, you can even regenerate the key. So if you think your key have been compromised, someone took your key, you can regenerate the key. You can see the key, and you can copy the key. Anyway, I'm going to delete or regenerate the key once the demo completed. You can copy this key and put it in your primary key. But in real life, in real-time programs, you are not going to hard code your endpoint URI, or you're not going to hard code your primary key. So there is a separate way. Either you can use the Azure configurations or the configurations in your code. So I prefer using Azure configurations. I'll show them in the next videos. But for learning purpose, I'm going to hard code them. So then the database ID and the container ID. So explore, go to the database, and DT container is the container ID, and DT database is the database ID. So DT database, DT container. So DT database, DT container. So hard coding these values is not do any harm, because the database and container ID will be similar for all the environments, but where the endpoint URN primary key will be different for different environments. If you hard code this in your real time, it's not going to work, but you can hard code these. But again, you can use the app settings.json to load the value, so that whenever there is a change, you can just make it easy. So now your code is ready to execute. Just put some breakpoints. See, going to first I'll console dot read line. Yeah, there is one more item to read. So which item you want to read? I want to read the Azure. So the ID, item to read, and what is the subject ID? The partition key ID, it's 2. Code is ready. So just execute it and see like what it's retrieving, and then we will see step-by-step debugging. We'll see what happening. Okay, so your Azure duration 60. So this is the specific item I was reading, and the query is taking a little more time. Yeah, so it retrieved items, .NET 45 days, Azure 60, Blazor 60, 21, which is matching the data. So let's debug this code and see. So you can see as results, yes, true. And then the response, you can see how many records, and expand the response, and you have 3. If you have more, get more. So you can see the request charge, resource, complete information about your transaction. The Cosmos DB is you have to write the code very, because every transaction it costs your organization. We have to be cautious when we are writing the code. Yes. So that's it. Just conclude the session what we have done. So we have seen how to create a Cosmos account using the browser. Then we have seen how to do it by using the command. Then we define the container and we define some data. Then I added some packages for my console application to enable the connectivity. Then we have seen how to create the connection by using Cosmos client, how to get the container instance, and then we have seen this is very important, like how to get the endpoint URI and primary key, the database ID and container ID. And after that, we have seen how to get a specific item by using the read item data asynchronously of the container, and by using query definition. So this query definition is using the feed iterator. This query definition can be executed in many different ways. So we will explore all other approaches in the later stages. And finally, we are able to retrieve the data. Thank you so much for watching my videos. This is very informative video on Cosmos DB. So you will see more videos on Cosmos in the next videos. So please share your feedback. So suggest any topics if you want to learn. Sit tight and watch for the next videos. So the next videos will be more informative, exciting topics and more real time. Thank you. Happy coding.